I was 14 years old and it was an ordinary night. It was around 9 p.m. My little cousin and I were at his house. My mom and aunt were out shopping and my dad and uncle were at the movies. I was babysitting that night, so we were sitting and watching TV. However, I had a strange feeling, as if something was wrong, but I couldn't quite figure out what it was. We continued watching TV, but the uneasy feeling wouldn't go away. After a while, I couldn't stand the feeling any longer, so I got up and walked to the kitchen to lock the back door. When I returned from the kitchen, I finally understood the reason for my unease. There was a man who looked very unkempt and homeless standing at the window. He was just staring at the window, looking at my cousin. For a moment, I was frozen, but I quickly gathered myself and told my cousin we needed to go upstairs. I told him that our parents would be home soon, and they wouldn't want him staying up late. Using this excuse, I took my cousin upstairs and put him to bed. Knowing there was a stranger outside who wanted to get in, I had to protect him. At that time, I weighed about 125 pounds and was 5'8". I played football at school, which gave me a bit of courage. I went back downstairs and went straight to the kitchen to grab one of the meat tenderizers. I returned to the window where I had seen the man earlier, but he wasn't there. I ran to the front door and checked if it was locked. Both the bolt and the knob were locked. I felt a bit relieved, but still needed to be cautious. I took my meat tenderizer and ran upstairs, sitting in front of my cousin's door. He asked me what I was doing, and I told him not to worry and to keep his head down. I called the police and explained the situation. I also called my dad and uncle. The police said they would take about half an hour, and my dad and uncle were 45 minutes away. While waiting, I suddenly heard the sound of a window breaking and heavy boots walking on the main floor. My heart started pounding like crazy. I told my cousin to stay calm, hide under the blanket, and be quiet. Hearing the man downstairs was terrifying. I gripped the meat tenderizer tightly and waited. About 5 minutes passed, and then I heard the boots coming up the stairs. At this point, I was having a terrible heart attack. My cousin's door was no more than 10 feet from the stairs. I heard him open the door to my aunt and uncle's room, then the bathroom. Then he went back downstairs and opened the basement door. Just then, police sirens began to sound, and within a few minutes, they stormed the house. It turned out that the man had escaped from a mental hospital 1 state away. The police subdued him and took him away, ensuring our safety. The fear and anxiety I felt at that moment were indescribable, but I was relieved to have been able to protect my cousin. After the police had the situation under control, they spoke with us. They tried to understand why the man was there. The man's identity had been determined, and we learned that he had escaped from a mental hospital. The police said that the man could have been dangerous and might have harmed us. This realization made the fear we felt even more real. While the police were checking around the house, my cousin and I hugged each other and waited. During this time, the police checked the windows and doors, making sure no one else was in the house. Fortunately, there was no other danger. After this incident, we realized we needed to be more careful about our family's safety. We learned to always lock doors and windows and not let strangers approach the house. This experience taught us how vulnerable we could be and how careful we needed to be. That night, when my family came home, I told them what had happened. My mom and dad understood how scared I must have been and comforted me. This incident brought me and my family closer together. We realized how important it was to be safe and support each other. What I went through that night became an unforgettable experience in my memory. That night, I did everything I could to protect myself and my cousin, and it gave me great confidence. Now, I feel more experienced and courageous in dealing with dangerous situations. I was 14 at the time I'm telling this story, but when it happened, I was just 11 years old. My sister had a toothache, something that was pretty common since she never brushed her teeth properly. My mom decided to take her to the dentist. It was a freezing cold day, and my mom asked me, "Would you like to come with us? I don't want you to stay home alone." I replied, "No, Mom, it's okay. I can stay home. "It's freezing outside." She agreed and said, "Okay, we're going to get you some food on the way back." I was happy with that and said, "Okay." They left and the house was suddenly quiet and still. About 2 minutes later, my phone rang. An unknown number was calling. I'm not the type to answer unknown numbers, so I ignored the call and let it hang up by itself. The phone kept ringing, but I continued to ignore it. All of this was happening while I was home alone, and the silence made every little noise seem louder. I started sneezing, so I went to my bed, grabbed a blanket, and got cozy. I called my friends and we played a lot of games together online. After that, I watched a movie and was having a good time, completely forgetting about the strange phone calls. I laughed and chatted with my friends, feeling relaxed and safe in my own home. That was until I heard someone breathing behind me. My heart raced and I got freaked out. I quickly moved to my sister's bed, hoping it was just my imagination. About 20 minutes later, the lights went out. I have a terrible fear of the dark. It's almost a phobia. I closed my eyes tightly, trying to calm myself. I didn't want to leave the safety of my blanket. I decided to use the flashlight on my phone, but my phone's battery was at 15%, and it needed to be charged over 20% to use the flashlight. I was stressed and scared, trying to figure out what to do. Then, as if things couldn't get worse, the wind caused the bathroom door to open and close. The sound of the door creaking and then slamming shut was terrifying. I had heard the bathroom door close earlier, so this really freaked me out. Each time it moved, my heart would skip a beat. The eerie silence of the house, combined with the howling wind outside, made the whole situation even more unnerving. Another 20 minutes passed, and the lights finally came back on. Just as I started to feel a bit relieved, the same unknown number called again. At that point, I was so fed up and scared that I didn't answer. I waited until the call hung up and then called my mom. I told her to come home as quickly as possible because I was really scared. She could hear the panic in my voice and agreed to hurry back. About 10 minutes later, they arrived home. I was so happy and relieved to see them. We laughed it off, trying to make light of the situation, but the fear lingered. The next morning, the same unknown number called my sister. I told her not to answer since the number had been calling me a lot the previous night. She looked at me, her eyes wide with concern, and nodded in agreement. Then, something even more unsettling happened. The number called my mom that night. She didn't answer because it was an unknown number, but the fact that this number knew all of our phone numbers was extremely creepy. Days went by and the calls stopped, but the memory of that night stayed with me. I found myself constantly checking my phone, feeling a sense of dread every time it rang. I started to question everything. How did they get our numbers? What did they want? The unknown caller remained a mystery. One evening, we decided to investigate the matter further. My dad suggested we contact the phone company to trace the number. After a few calls and some convincing, we managed to get the phone company to look into it. They informed us that the number was untraceable, likely coming from an unregistered, possibly disposable phone. This revelation sent chills down my spine. My parents installed extra security measures around the house. We got new locks, a security system, and even motion sensor lights. Despite these precautions, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every creak, every unexpected sound would set my nerves on edge. My fear of the dark intensified, and I found it hard to sleep without a light on. The incident became a topic of conversation among my friends and family. Everyone had their theories. Some thought it was a prank, while others believed it was something more sinister. My uncle even shared a similar experience he had years ago, which made the whole thing even creepier. This story is real. It might seem a bit disjointed, but I can't forget that day. It taught me to be more cautious and aware of my surroundings. I hope you guys take this seriously because it was truly frightening. It was a winter night, and I was 15 years old. home alone because my family had gone out for dinner on that cold and dark evening. At first, it seemed quite normal. I turned on the TV, had some snacks, and tried to relax. But as the night went on, the silence in the house became increasingly unsettling. It was around 10 p.m., and even the sound of the TV wasn't comforting enough anymore. The cold air swirling inside the house and the howling wind outside brought to mind scenes from horror movies. For a moment, I tried to create rational thoughts and smile to myself, but then my cell phone rang. The screen displayed unknown number. Hesitantly, I answered the call. "Hello," I said quietly. The silence on the other end was broken after a few seconds by a crackling breathing sound. It seemed like someone had forgotten to breathe, and then the call ended. My heart started pounding. This had to be a prank, right? About 5 minutes later, my phone rang again. It was the same unknown number. I didn't answer and turned off the phone, but the unease inside me was growing. It felt like someone was watching me. I turned off the TV and decided to go to bed. I locked my bedroom door and got into bed. I placed my phone under my pillow and turned off the light. As I tried to close my eyes in the dark, I heard a faint rustling sound in the house. I tried to figure out what the sound was, but my heart was pounding so loudly it echoed in my ears. After a while, I noticed the sounds becoming more distinct. Footsteps from downstairs, the sound of something being dragged on the floor. I opened my eyes and scanned the room in the dark. My heart was pounding as if it was about to burst out of my chest. I reached for my phone to find my charger, and just then I heard the footsteps slowly coming up the stairs. The footsteps were slow, deliberate. I froze in bed and held my breath. I stood behind the door, trying to think about what to do. Countless horrifying scenarios raced through my mind. Suddenly, I felt a presence standing in front of my door. I held my breath and waited. When I heard the doorknob slowly turning, I was paralyzed with fear. As the person started to push the door open, I mustered all my courage and shouted, "Who's there?" For a moment, there was silence. Then, a deep, cold voice from the other side of the door replied, "You were expecting me, weren't you?" Frozen in fear, I got out of bed and retreated to the back corner of the room. The door slowly opened, and a dark figure entered. It was neither a family member nor a familiar face. The eyes, glowing with a wild look in the darkness, were fixed on me. Gripping my phone tightly, I managed to dial for help. As the call went through, the deep voice said, "You're not alone tonight." My phone slipped from my hand and hit the floor. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Paralyzed with fear, I waited in the corner as the figure slowly approached me. The terror inside me reached a level I had never felt before. At the last moment, sirens blared from downstairs and bright lights filled the room. The door was forcefully opened and the police rushed in. The man immediately tried to escape, but he was quickly apprehended. The police calmed me down and informed me that my family was on their way home. As the adrenaline slowly faded, I realized how close I had been to danger. The police conducted a thorough search of the house and found evidence that the intruder had been watching me for some time. They assured me that he wouldn't be able to harm me again. In the days that followed, I struggled with fear and anxiety. The sense of violation lingered, knowing someone had invaded my safe space. However, with the support of my family and therapy sessions, I gradually regained my sense of security. That night taught me valuable lessons about vigilance and the importance of trusting my instincts. I learned that safety isn't guaranteed, but taking precautions and seeking help can make all the difference in a moment of crisis.